All right, well, welcome back, folks, to another exciting talk that the Department of History and the President's Committee on Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion is happy to bring to us. This is for Native American Heritage Month. My name is Craig Nakashian. I'm the chair of the History Department, and I'm very happy to introduce our speaker for today, Dan Vick, who is the collections manager for the Museum of the Red River up in Idabel, Oklahoma. So he'll kind of guide us through some of their exhibits, talk about some of their artifacts, and then we will hopefully have some time for questions. So Daniel, please take it away.
Okay, well, thank you. First of all, can you see the screen? Okay, good. Okay, well, thank you all for inviting me to share a few details about the museum with you today in honor of Native American Heritage Month. My presentation today is titled Behind the Pyramid, a glimpse into the collections of the Museum of the Red River. And the title is a bit of a nod to our recent construction project that we completed in April of last year, in which we did lots of renovations throughout the building, kind of starting out in the collections area, which is what I'm in charge of, but also impacting other public spaces and galleries, as well as adding a pyramid to the facade of our building, which is inspired by the pyramids of Mesoamerica. And so our collections room does actually sit behind that pyramid. So we're going to have a brief discussion on that today, what's in collections, and highlighting some of what I think are some of our more notable pieces in collections. So first off, I want to give you all a little bit of background on the museum itself, how it's changed and evolved through the years, just to kind of catch you up if you're not familiar with what we do here. The Museum of the Red River was founded in 1974 by a local family from Idabel. They had started amassing collections in '74, and we actually opened to the public in 1975. That black and white photo that you see of the brick building is actually the original museum building, and it was somewhere in the neighborhood of 2,200 square feet. And that served us from '75 up until around '97. And because of expanding collections and the museum leadership at the time wanting to expand programming opportunities, it was decided that we needed to grow the building as well. And so the museum began its first major renovation starting in '97 and going through around '99. And so the building that you see on the upper right-hand corner is the result of that first expansion. I will say there were a couple of other expansions in between 1999 and 2016. One thing most people know about us is that we have a cast skeleton of the Acrocanthosaurus attucensis, a dinosaur that was excavated here in our county. And so we had to add on a wing in 2005 to accommodate that. And then in 2009, we added on a community conference center in the back of the building as well. So to address some of our needs for more space for community events. Well, by the time we got to 2016, our collection storage facility was quickly running out of space. Donations had stepped up a great deal, and we also needed to address our museum store, public spaces for hosting larger events, larger numbers of people, and classroom spaces for our programming department. So we embarked on another expansion project in 2016 that lasted around 3 years. We finally wrapped things up last year and opened to the public in April. And that brought our footprint up to a little over 50,000 square feet. So a big change in, of course, in the look of the building, and also in over the years in our collecting focus, which is what we'll kind of talk more about after this point. So to kind of go over how our collections focus has evolved over the years, really the first 10 years of the museum's existence, we were focused primarily on regional archaeology. And so that's archaeology that was going on in this 4 states region. The museum actively participated in doing archaeology at that time. Our first director was a field archaeologist, and museum sponsored field schools. We did archaeological work under contract to a number of governmental agencies in that period. And again, that was about the first 10 years. So by 1985, the focus was sort of shifting. The museum stopped doing archaeology. We had stored various materials here for some of those government agencies, and we returned those materials back to the particular agencies. And the decision was made to place our regional archaeology collections into a greater context. And so there's more focus on collecting Native American art from the rest of the Americas, North, Central, and South America, from pre-Columbian times up to contemporary art pieces that were being done. So by the time we get to 1999, and this kind of coincides with that first major expansion I mentioned earlier, the collecting focus sort of shifted again. By this point in time, we had made the decision to acquire the cast skeleton of the Acrocanthosaurus, and that was definitely outside of what we did. And so the boards and the leadership at that time made the decision that we could increase our artifact collecting focus. Again, sort of expanding our scope, putting our native collections, which remain the core of the collections, in a global context this time. So we began to acquire collections from Africa, from East Asia, and from the oceanic regions as well. And that's really reflected in our mission statement, which is there at the bottom of the page, to preserve and celebrate the world's artistic heritage while emphasizing Native American groups. And again, we do have these smaller representative collections from outside the Americas, but the Native American collections still remain kind of the core of what we do. And the photos that you see there on the side are a couple of shots from inside our collection storage room. And we'll see a few more as we go along. So a few facts and other things about our collections. Currently, we have about 35,000 objects in collections, and that includes objects made from 10,000 years ago up to the present time. Somewhere around 300 to 500 new acquisitions are added to the museum's collections each year, and this is largely through donations, but we do have select purchase funds, so we are able to make purchases from time to time that kind of fill in the gaps of things that we may be missing here in the collections. These 35,000 objects are stored in our newly renovated climate-controlled safe room, and it actually is a safe room. Part of the discussions in planning for the renovations from a few years back included how to best protect this growing collection that we have. We are in Oklahoma, so we do have tornadoes. So that was a consideration that we had to take very seriously. And so the decision was made to build a safe room around our collections. So the walls are 8-inch thick concrete, and the ceiling has a 10-inch thick concrete slab cap on top. And it's designed to withstand an F5 tornado. So hopefully we're prepared. We also hope we never have to test that out and find out. But I think we're in good shape there. We were able to increase our storage capacity by about 80% during our renovations, which was a major help. And there is still some free shelving left, so we do have some room to grow our collections. Okay, and on the slide here, you see a couple of shots from the construction process of collections. This was actually our former gallery space. There were 2 galleries that we retrofitted to turn into our new collections storage facility. And in the picture on the left, you can see that our shelving units are going into place. We had a compacted shelving system, and we were able to expand that and add cabinets and drawers as well as the open shelving. Another neat feature about the collection storage room is that it's visible to our visitors. So there's a hallway around two sides of the room, and visitors are actually able to look through the glass, which you can see is being installed in this photo, and get a real feel for the breadth and the depth of the collections. Okay, a few more photos from collections after all the dust was cleaned out and we managed to unpack and get objects on the shelves. There are 3 rows of shelves that are visible to the public, and on the photo on the left, you see this is kind of a highlight of our Southeastern basketry collection, which I'll talk more about later. And then at the bottom is kind of a selection from our Southwestern pottery collection, which I'll also talk about in more detail a bit later. And the other photo was an intern that I had during this unpacking and moving in period who helped me sort everything out and get things on the shelves where they needed to be. Okay, so to kind of move away from the background of collections into what I think are some of our more significant Native American sub-collections. And I've chosen 6 here that I think best represent some of the best and brightest of our holdings here. First of all, regional archaeology, which I mentioned earlier, was what the museum really focused on in that first 10-year period. We have somewhere in the neighborhood of 750 Caddoan and Mississippian ceramics and over 1,000 stone tools, largely, again, from the 4-state area. Southwestern ceramics, we have around 1,000 pottery pieces from prehistoric times up into the contemporary era. Southeastern basketry, we have around 500 examples of baskets from the Choctaw, Chickasaw, Cherokee, Creek, Seminole, Coushatta, Chitimacha, and Homa tribes from the southeastern United States. We have a significant Plains beadwork collection of around 300 items, which I think the most interesting are the cradles, but that's just my own personal bias, and we have around 50 cradles. Amazonian featherwork, we have somewhere around 800 pieces of very stunning, vibrant feathered headdresses and body ornaments made by the peoples of the Amazon River Basin. And then we have a significant collection of pre-Columbian ceramics from Central and South America, around 1,000, including pieces from West Mexico, Central America, and the Andes of Peru. So what I want to do now is kind of go through each one of these categories and show a couple of examples of some neat pieces, I think, that sort of represent each of these categories well. And we'll start off with regional archaeology. The bottle that you see on the right-hand side of the screen is a great example of a Hodges and Graves style ceramic bottle made by the Caddoan peoples around 1400 to 1700 AD. The Hodges and Graves style of pottery was found primarily in Northeast Texas, Northwest Louisiana, Southwest Arkansas. And if you're familiar with Caddoan pottery, you realize the shape is very much classic Caddo. You see that gourd style bottle shape a lot. The crosshatch designs that you see on this piece are very typical of the Hodges and Graves style, as are the scroll motifs, which also appear quite a bit among artworks from other southeastern tribes. And the thought is that the scroll is a reference to a celestial body. So one example of our Caddoan ceramics there. Now the piece on the left-hand side of the screen is a stone axe with its wooden handle that was made by the Caddoan peoples prior to 1800. And this is a very interesting piece, and I think one of our more popular pieces in the archaeological study area that we have on exhibit. This piece was actually found in the Red River, south of Idabel, by a local collector. And what's so unique about this particular piece is that you typically find the stone axe heads, fairly common, but it's very rare to find the wooden handle, obviously because of the ravages of time and the environment. So just very rare to have that wooden handle along with the axe. So you can see exactly how it would have looked. So again, I think one of our more popular pieces among our archaeological study area. Okay, now to move over to the southwestern United States for a bit, our Southwestern ceramics collection. Our founders were very interested in the pottery of the Southwest and began collecting fairly early on. And what you see here are two examples of prehistoric Southwestern pottery, both from the Four Corners area of the Southwestern United States. The jar on the left is an example of a Tularosa black on white style or type jar from the Anasazi people of the Four Corners region. And that dates to around 1100 to 1250. The Tularosa style of pottery is very bold with geometric designs in black and white. And again, those scroll motifs show up again, as well as stepped and really fine line designs. And then the jar on the right is from the Mimbres culture of southern New Mexico, also a black on white storage jar with some interesting design elements as well. You'll note there that there's this solid black step design with a circle and a dot. And researchers believe that that is an abstract representation of a bird. And that bird motif is sort of echoed if you look around the neck of the jar. That's actually a painted display of a splay of feathers. And what's really neat about the feather motif is that it's a tradition that's been carried on throughout Southwestern pottery. If you're familiar with Maria Martinez, who was the San Ildefonso potter, she decorated a lot of her black on black vessels with the feather motif, and it's one that's still in use today by many Southwest potters. So you see a very much a continuity of design. And then moving from prehistoric Southwestern ceramics to historic and contemporary, there are three figures you see here on the slide from Cochiti Pueblo in New Mexico. And I'll start off with the figure at the far right, kind of in the background, the two in the photo of the two singers. Potters at Cochiti Pueblo started making these types of figures in the late 1800s through the early 1900s. And these human effigies have a great deal of personality, as you can tell, and proved to be very popular among collectors. Oftentimes, they were depicting non-native people. And so you see cowboys, you see businessmen. And we think that this figure in the background is actually depicting a gallery owner because he is holding a jar that would have been for sale. And so again, just a lot of personality on those. Somewhere around 1915, they stopped producing the figures, and they sort of fell out of favor for many years. And it really wasn't until the mid-1980s, with the efforts of a contemporary potter named Virgil Ortiz, that the figures started to be produced again. And so Virgil Ortiz really kind of revitalized this whole tradition that had kind of gone away for a while. And the figure in the foreground on the right side is a piece that called Opera Singer that Virgil Ortiz did in 1990. And you can see very much the inspiration from the circa 1900 piece in the background. Now, Virgil Ortiz is notable because he took that traditional form and he really ran with it. And the lady on the left-hand side of the screen is a more recent example of what Virgil Ortiz is doing with Cochiti figures. So just a great example of how a native artist takes a tradition but goes in different directions with it, whether changing form or commentary on the piece itself. Okay, and moving back over to the southeastern United States, say a few things about our southeastern basketry collection. The This was another area that, in particular, museum co-founder Mary Herron was interested in, was baskets, southeastern baskets in particular. And among the southeastern baskets, river cane baskets. And so what's on the slide here are two examples of the river cane basketry tradition. On the left is a lidded basket or a trunk made by a lady named Lottie Stamper, who was Eastern Cherokee from North Carolina. And it may be difficult to tell by the picture, but this basket is actually a double-walled basket or double weave basket. And Lottie Stamper was important in revitalizing that tradition. It had been known in prehistoric times, but again, it's one of those things that for some reason, double-walled baskets stopped being produced at some point. Lottie Stamper saw an example, became interested in the mid-20th century, and began to create double-walled baskets again, and revitalizing a form that had sort of died out. And I say double-walled, she actually starts the weaving process in a typical way from the bottom, and then forms the sides up to the desired height. And then the weaving turns down to form that second layer inside. So great example of a double-walled Cherokee river cane basket there. And then on the other side of the page, another form of river cane basket, a large hamper made by Susan Denson, who was one of the most notable Choctaw basket weavers of the 20th century. One thing about this basket that's of note is its size. It's about 22 inches high, which is a good size for southeastern baskets. Also, if you notice the variety of colors on there, most of those were achieved through natural dyes, in particular walnut hulls or walnut bark and bloodroot are the two most common. The design that you see, which is a diamond shape with crosses in the middle, is referred to by Choctaw basket weavers as the cow's eye design. And again, a basket of this size with the manipulation of design is just very indicative of the skill of a weaver like Susan Denson. Okay, and going from southeastern basketry to plains beadwork, I chose a couple of cradles because, as I mentioned earlier, I think those are some of the most interesting segments of plains beadwork that we have. And there's really a great variation among cradle forms among all the tribes of the plains, and I just narrowed it down to two here. The example on the right-hand side of the screen is what we call a cradle hood or a soft cradle. There's no wooden support or back to it. It's actually a piece of rawhide that's been fully beaded over, and it's from the Lakota people, made around 1890. And the Lakota women were known as expert beadworkers, and it was considered to be a status symbol to possess such an object as this that had the attention of fully beaded details on it. And so mothers would try to outdo one another in creating examples like this. So this example of a soft cradle, the baby would be snuggled up inside there, pretty tight, and the mother could actually hold the cradle in her lap. And this is a different style than what you see on the other side of the screen. A model cradle made by Vanessa Jennings around 2000. This is actually a miniature or a model cradle, but made in the same style that a full-size usable cradle would be made. Model cradles were made in the historic period by Native women, and they were used as playthings for girls and as teaching tools as well, to teach them how to use a cradle. But this example of a lattice cradle, very much traditional in its execution, with the two sticks on the back, with the sort of abstract beadwork that you see along the sides here. And then on the top are these danglers that were added to be similar, I guess, to a mobile, you know, dangling playthings for the baby to amuse themselves with. Vanessa Jennings is a contemporary beadworker and cradle maker who really excels at what she does, which is obvious from the detail she has given to this particular cradle. Okay, the next area I wanted to speak a little bit about is our Amazonian featherwork collection. And I think this is probably something that surprises most people when they come to Idabel, Oklahoma, and they see our Amazonian featherwork, and that we have so much of it here. As I mentioned earlier, around 800 pieces. We try to do an exhibit of Amazonian featherwork about every 4 to 5 years. It's one of those exhibits that's in our regular rotation because it's so popular. And it's so bright and colorful that people always enjoy it when we have it up. It was hard to pick just one image that sort of encapsulated the collection, but I couldn't get away from this guy. I couldn't resist our, we call him Chikrin Boy. And he is a mannequin that is decorated in a traditional costume for a young boy's naming ceremony among the Chikrin people in Mato Grosso, Brazil. The Chikrin people, like most of the tribes of the Amazon, have a number of ceremonies that they observe that commemorate different stages of life. So naming, passage into adulthood, curing and healing, as well as death. And so each of the ceremonies tend to have different costumes. And this particular one, again, is what a young boy would wear when he's receiving his name. One of the interesting things about the Amazonian featherwork, especially with a costume as intricate and detailed as this one is that the majority of the materials are items that were found locally, from the feathers that you see that constitute the headdress that's worn on the back of the head, to the seeds and shell that are used to create the armbands and the necklace, to the cotton down as well. So with the exception, I think, of the glass bead necklace, which would have been trade goods, most everything was, you know, from the local environment. The people were expert at using those local resources to really create some stunning artwork. Okay, and the final section that I want to sort of introduce today is our pre-Columbian Central and South American ceramics. What you see on the screen here are 3 examples of pottery from Mexico, Costa Rica, and Peru. And one thing that seems to be a common feature among pre-Columbian, Mesoamerican, and South American ceramics is their representational quality. Be it birds, humans, plants, in many cases architecture. There are some ceramic vessels that are depicting houses. They really went all out for representational ceramics and just totally excelled at doing so. So to start off with, the parrot figure that you see on the left-hand side. This is a ceramic parrot effigy jar from the Colima culture of West Mexico, around the current West Mexican state of Colima. This dates to 250 BC to around 250 AD. The Colima vessels are noted for their use of red paint, which is obvious here, and sometimes tan paint for body details such as the beak or the feet. Typically, they're hollow-bodied, and they are found in burial contexts. There have been numerous shaft tombs that have been excavated in West Mexico where many ceramics were found around the body. And there's a couple of ideas that revolve around why that was the case. One is that the vessels were filled with food or liquids that would accompany the deceased person along their journey in the afterlife. Another is that these figures were representations of things that were important to the deceased and were going along with that person on their journey. The jar in the middle is from the Nicoya coast of Costa Rica. It's a tripod leg jar with some effigy features on it that are depicting an ocelot. The head that you see there on the middle section, and then if you notice on the legs, there are spots painted on those legs. The Nicoya cultures we don't know a whole lot about, but we do know that they made some pretty impressive ceramic vessels, again with this representational quality. And then finally, on the left side of the screen there is a portrait head stirrup spout bottle from the Moche peoples of the northern coast of Peru. And this dates from around 100 BC to roughly 700 AD. The Moche really excelled at creating these types of vessels. The head part was made in a mold, and so they could turn out quite a few of them. And there are many surviving examples of Moche figural bottles still around. And again, they depicted a wide range of subject matter from human heads to animals, plants, architecture once again. This particular bottle is a warrior figure, and you can see that he's wearing a helmet that has painted designs, these sort of step designs, which I'm not really sure what those are symbolizing, but he's wearing a helmet with a chin strap. And warrior figures were actually very common among the Moche ceramic vessels. And the theory is that these were also burial offerings, similar to the Colima parrot. And the theory is that these warriors were accompanying their lords into the afterlife to serve as protection. Okay, and so that sort of wraps up my brief tour of our collections and highlights of some of our, what I think are some of our more notable pieces. And of course, I couldn't talk about the museum without throwing in a picture of our Acrocanthosaurus skeleton. So to just wrap up, I would like to say thank you again, and I hope that you're all able to come visit us sometime.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much, Daniel. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we got some time for questions.
Yes.
I did dive over to the interwebs. I figured I would put the museum's website over here in the chat if anyone wants to check it out or join. Just saying.
Good idea.
There. So yeah. Any questions or comments, thoughts, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I have one. I would like to come visit, but what are you guys doing during the time of COVID to keep people safe?
Well, we are still open. We were closed for about a month back in the spring, but we reopened. We have masks available for visitors if they don't have one themselves. We have hand sanitizer stations set up throughout the building. And I think like everyone else, we've stepped up our cleaning and disinfectant routine. So we're doing that regularly. And we do try to limit the number of people in each gallery space. For the most part, it's not difficult for us. We usually don't have large numbers of people in the building at a given time. And we're big enough that we can keep people spread out and distanced. So.
Thank you. Doug, yes, you had your hand.
Daniel, thank you. That was Cool. I have two questions. The first of which is, and maybe you can't answer it, but what is the average time that folks spend actually in the museum? I'm thinking in that direction of sort of to get a sense of the size of it. And the second question I would have is how kid-friendly is it, right? And how hands-on, and if there are things for children, or is this something that, I'm going to have to sneak away from my kids and come and actually experience?
Yeah. Well, I'll answer your second question first. Up until COVID, we were more kid friendly, because one thing I forgot to mention, and I'll go back a little bit to the first screen to help jog my memory here, or the second screen. So the original building, as the expansions happened, we just built around the building. So that original gallery space is now our Holland and Sally Webb Family Learning Center. And so this is the part of the museum where we have hands-on children's activities. We have a library for kids and families. But with COVID, we had to shut that down because everything is hands-on, and it was just too big of a risk to keep that open. We were able to reopen, but we don't have any of the activities. So you can come and see the room, but there's not really anything that you can do hands-on. So I guess to answer your question, we are kid-friendly, but with COVID, we've had to dial that back a little bit.
Perfect answer. Thank you.
Sure. And you'll have to remind me of your first question.
I'm just curious about the amount of time an individual usually spends. I mean, are we talking the hour and you feel like you've seen it all, or do you feel like you need, people spend 3 hours and feel like they still haven't even really uncovered anything?
Yeah, a lot of that depends on the visitor. I know I've witnessed people who are in and out in 20 minutes, who just kind of walk through each room. There are other people who spend half a day reading every label, going through all the galleries. So I guess it sort of depends on whether, you're really a label reader or you're just
that's fair. It's just one of those things that I'm trying to comprehend the size of it in my brain, looking at a picture and struggling to do so. But that makes a lot of sense.
Well, I will mention, and I didn't think of this, or I could have included it, but if you go on our website, there is a virtual tour that you can access. And so you can get a better feel for the gallery spaces and what you'll see if you do choose to visit.
I think when I brought my in-laws up there, this would have been before the new expansion, but there was construction going on and stuff. I think we spent at least an hour.
Yeah, that was 30 to 45 minutes is probably an average for the majority, but yeah, you can easily spend an hour.
We did have one question in the chat from Emily. What's the rotation schedule on your exhibits? How often do you swap them out?
Okay, well, we have two main large exhibit galleries. Our Founders Gallery is sort of our semi-permanent space. And we sort of rotate things in there out on a case-by-case basis. We don't have a hard and fast schedule for that. But our Curtis Gallery is our regular changing gallery. And we change exhibits about every 8 weeks.
Wow.
So the exhibit we have up right now is a pre-Columbian exhibit, which would be more of what you saw on the last slide. Essentially, and that's going to be up through the middle of December. And then at the end of the year, we always have a recent acquisitions exhibit to highlight some of what we've been donated or purchased during the past year. And so then that will be up through the spring.
Cool. Dr. Jordan has a question on how often fines wash out of the banks of the Red River. How often do you?
That's the only one I know of. So they're few and far between.
There you go.
Or if they do, they're not bringing them into us anymore.
Fair enough. All right. Any other questions or thoughts from anyone? Yep.
I was about to type a question, but it might be easier just to ask it. And that is, do you have scholars who come in and look at the collection, use items in the collection?
Yes,
you set up to accommodate that?
Yeah, we're very amenable to having scholars come in. We have people who come in and research specific areas. We also have guest curators from time to time. The pre-Columbian exhibit that's up now, our adjunct curator put that together for us. And so we are very open to research.
Great. It's wonderful. I can't wait to come visit. Can't
Good.
believe we've been here 8 years and I haven't been there yet, but we will be as soon as we can.
Yeah, come on.
Yeah, it is a cool place. Doug, did you have another comment?
Yeah, in preparing, and you were talking about as you went through and mentioned some of your favorites. I guess the other question I would have, knowing the idea of trying to make sure you see right the exhibit, are there a couple of things that are not included in what you showed us today that you would say are sort of can't miss moments?
Object wise,
Yeah, or otherwise, you know, one of those things that like you know, people, if you really want to experience I would say make sure you don't miss this.
yeah, I think obviously the dinosaur is a big thing, and that does tend to be what brings a lot of people through the door. It's the most easily marketable thing, I guess, from at the museum. But the good thing is that a lot of people will come in and see everything else that they didn't realize was here. But there is one other particular piece that I didn't add that I would say, yeah, you've got to see our glass hat. It's actually it's done by a Northwest Coast artist named Preston Singletary. And if you're familiar with Northwest Coast wooden hats, they sort of have a round disc on top and then they flare out at the bottom. And Preston Singletary took that traditional form and made one out of glass, essentially a vessel out of glass. And so that is one of our most spectacular pieces that I would say, yeah, you got to see that. And it is on exhibit, so.
Cool. Dr. Jordan has very kindly sent us a link to the LA History Museum in Shreveport that also has a canoe, a Caddo canoe.
Yes, yes.
Good Louisiana guy promoting it. But that's a cool place too, if you get down to Shreveport. It is a cool place. Any other questions? I see you, Julian, laughing. Any other thoughts, questions from anyone? Okay. In that case, thank you once again, Daniel. It was fantastic. Hopefully,
thank you for having me.
Everyone can get up there and visit, or at the very least, go to the website, take the virtual tour, join, donate, all those sorts of good things. And you know, when COVID ends, we can all go up together, something like that.
Right.
Thanks again, man. Appreciate it.
Thank you all.